Okay, we are learning Shin Kaf Zion, which is kind of a cute little siman, a very short siman. It's really a preparation or a omen, or I don't know, omen, a precursor to the next siman, Shin Kaf Chet, which is a big siman about refuah in general. But here we're sort of talking about a particular aspect of refuah, and I didn't want to skip it because it has some interesting things in it. And I gave you a couple sources that are really not quoted specifically by the Beit Yosef, but are good sources just to get background of what the whole issue of refuah is on Shabbat. What is refuah is, on the one hand, it's not a malacha, right? It's not one of the 39 malachas. It's no malacha, refuah. Although it's interesting that the Mishnah Brura brings that sometimes if you like clean up a wound, like and you do the final work that a doctor would do, it would be makeh b'patish, and then it would be a malacha. It's interesting that but refuah is not.
Yeah, but I always thought about that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
always thought about that. Is it since there's the Easter, you go searching for things. But in other words, you know what I'm saying? In other words,
Yeah, I think that refuah is an isser looking for a reason.
yeah,
It's
there you go.
we're looking for a reason for this isser. Although I might point out that it's very well based isser because I mean I wouldn't say it's I was once at another institute where they said that where they quoted the New Testament because Jesus, he heals on Shabbat, and the rabbis get very angry about that. And so the joke is, yeah, we have a Tanaitic source, the New Testament, that refuah is forbidden. So my point is, whatever you're going to say, it seems to be that it's an old issue. Whether or not it's one of the 39 malachas, we don't seem to want refuah to be done on Shabbat. No healing of lepers on Shabbat. Um, so let's start with this Mishnah that I gave you in Kuf Het. Um, maybe Ori, you want to read it for us?
Sure.
This is the
I
Mishnah
have
in
it on my
Kuf Het.
computer, but let me just grab my Gemara right here.
Yeah, have a Gemara. That's a good idea. Have a Gemara Shabbos. We'll be looking at Kuftet and Nun Gimel.
Look my Gemara out. Let me just open it up on the computer. I got it. Kuf Tet. Amud Bet.
Amud Bet. Kuftet Amud Bet. Parak 14, if you're in the Mishnayos. And the Mishnah starts,
En
Ein
ochlin
Ochlin.
ezovyon. En ochlin ezovyon b'Shabbat lefi she'eno ma'achal bri'im. אבל אוכל הוא את יועזר ושותה אבו ורועה. So you can't eat izovion because that's not a normal food that healthy people would eat.
So what is do you know what Ezovyon is?
Some kind of medical plant of some sort.
It's
Yeah. So it's from by modern Hebrew, the word Ezov, which is hyssop.
supposedly it has antiseptic properties. It's a cough reliever, and it also gets mucus to stop being built up.
Right. So you can't eat it on Shabbat. It's interesting because it's actually used in zatar nowadays. It's like an ingredient of zatar. So maybe nowadays you could eat it because people eat it as a food, but you can't eat it in quantity, I guess.
Maybe it's already nitchan, and so the ein tochen hartochen in zata, right? That's the.
No, I hear you, but no.
Right.
Anyway,
they're just saying anything that's for anything that you eat that no one would eat as food, but they would eat as refuah, you can't eat.
and
But
the other examples,
which is a different kind of maybe medicinal food, is also
it's
a
kind of
normal
like Yoezer is kind of like wild spearmint. And avo ruya.
Abu vroe, yeah.
I have is called knot grass water. Kind of like boiled, like some kind of wild grass that you maybe boil it and drink the water.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all done as the Gemara actually discusses. They're all done for like different curative purposes, like getting rid of jaundice, for example. Well, that's what we're about to see. Uruka is jaundice. So anyway, these things, you don't eat these things because they're for refuah. But about ochel hu et these things you can drink, right? You can't eat the hyssop because it's not a food of a healthy person. About ochel hu et yoezer v'shotei avruya. Why can you eat those?
Because those are food, assumedly because those are also normal foods that people eat, not only for medicinal purposes.
Right. Rashi says, because many people eat them when they are healthy. So this is the basic idea that, like, you probably all heard that you're allowed to take vitamins on Shabbat because people just take vitamins. They're not because they're sick. They just want to have a supplement, food supplements they can take. But as opposed to, a medicine, well, I don't want to paskin, but let's say, Tylenol or something, which is clearly a medicine, clearly for some kind of refuah.
Reb Nachum?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's like two ways because it's really the Rashi where we're relying on there, right? He says, "Sharbe ochlinoto keshen beriim," right?
Right.
And the question is, are they taking it as a preventative, or are they just like eating it as food? And I think Rashi means you take it as a preventative there, but
I don't think that's the pshat. I think the pshat
Rashi's
is
not saying why they're taking it. He's just saying people eat it.
yeah, but that would make a difference with vitamins, right? Like if it's about a preventative or to keep you healthy, then vitamins are allowed. But if it's
Well,
something that's
all
like,
food keeps you healthy. I mean,
okay, like, I mean, some of it just keeps you like alive. I guess it keeps you alive, as opposed to like prevents disease versus just like keeps you,
well,
being
look at the
having.
first Rashi. Look at the first Rashi. The first Rashi is actually very important. Read
Yeah.
the first Rashi.
Etovion? Do you want me to do?
Ori.
Okay.
I don't have the Rashi open because I'm on the computer. Here, hold on, I can get it. There it is. As of Yon, Mefaresh Begmara she'eno ma'achal bri'im u'muchacha milta de l'refua achilei. Right, so it's obvious, it's clear to all that you're eating it for refuah, and that's the problem. But if it's a food, if it's recognized as something that people eat, then people don't know you're doing refuah.
Right, exactly. You're allowed to secret. It's like between you and yourself, you're doing refuah. But as long as the onlooker will say, "Oh, it doesn't mean he's sick. He's just eating it." In other words, if you eat vitamins, that doesn't mean you're sick. You could be eating it doesn't have to be preventative. I mean, it's to make you healthy, whatever. Making yourself healthy is not the problem. The problem is taking yourself from doing something to take you from an unhealthy state to a healthy state. You see what I mean? That you're sick and you're taking this in order to help you get out of some trouble that you're in. But if you're not in any trouble and you take it anyway, then even though, like you could say, like Joel, like they're saying it's preventative, but you may not even thinking about preventative. You're just taking it because you take it. You read somewhere that you're supposed to take
health is not the right word.
What? You read somewhere
health is maybe not the word, but healing is the right word. Healing is
right. Healing, but healing. My point is like this: healing implies that you were unhealthy, that you were sickly.
Yep.
If you only took this thing when you need healing, then you can't. But if you take this thing even when you don't need healing, right now you're taking vitamin C, but you don't need any healing right now. You're perfectly strong and healthy. So then when you take it when you do need healing, it's not clear that you're taking that vitamin C for the healing properties of it. Is that Joel?
Yeah.
I like that.
Ruben had a hand up.
Somebody had a hand up?
Oh, yes, thank you. Sorry. I'm confused by this mission because it seems the problem is not the healing itself. The problem is the appearance of healing. So maybe we have the gezerah against something that appears like refuah because the problem is actually grinding. I mean, it seems like because as long as you are drinking something that other people would drink just to eat for drinking, you can heal yourself. That's not the problem. It seems to me.
Right. So you're right. Why is that? In other words, so it seemed like it would have been simple to say you can't. It's like there's two parts to it. There's two parts. One part is you can't do anything. You can't take a medicine because we're worried that that's where you have to start off, really. You can't take a medicine because we're worried that you might grind something, which we're going to see in the Gemara, in the other Gemara. And then once you say you can't take a medicine, we get to the question, well, what's a medicine? Now, we have to define what's a medicine. So is an apple a medicine? So you can't have you can't have an apple? So what is a medicine? So once we establish that you can't take medicine because of grinding, then we still have to establish, okay, well, what is a medicine? And then that will be determined by a different factor, which is, do healthy people eat it? If the healthy people eat it, then it's not a medicine. But you're right. Well, why do we care what people think? It's a little bit weird. Why do we just say?
Because it's a kind of not grinding is an institutional concern in the first place. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense to say I can't eat a leaf. I'm not grinding it. I'm eating a whole leaf. You still can't, because institutionally, I'm showing that you can do medicine, and then people are going to come to grind. So it is an institutional concern, maybe in the first place, and that's why.
In other words, if you would do something that seems to be healing, then people would say, "Oh, I can heal. I'll take some regular medicine." And then people will say, "Oh, I take regular medicine, but I don't have it ready. I better grind it up."
So it's an institutional concern. It's public.
Rabbi Landis has some helpful.
Okay, yeah. Well, when you look at the whatever illustrations I saw from ancient or medieval time, and so have you seen it as well? The doctor is not shown with a stethoscope and with a thermometer, and those, or with a blood pressure machine, which I get all the time, twice a week, and all the rest of that stuff. They're always shown with a mortar and pestle. There's no such thing as anything else, and no one goes out and buys a Tylenol. Even there's no Tylenol. There's no nothing. Everything is ground. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. I want to hear what the shir tells me, but I'm thinking about that when I come to that.
Right.
And refuah is grinding. There's nothing else outside of that.
But the weird thing is that we're only prohibiting refuah that looks like refuah.
Oh, well, okay.
We're allowing you to do refuah as long as it doesn't look like refuah.
Fine, on that basis, and I think there's something to it. All medicines that are the 19 medicines I take daily, okay, none of them look like refuah.
Why not? The healthy people don't take
all they are is a pill.
Well, that looks like refuah. Refuah is a pill.
It's now I don't have your contemporary consciousness. I'm an old guy. I'm from those. I'm actually from that time,
And besides, if you say a vitamin is fine because and a vitamin doesn't look like healing, then neither does the pill. I mean, many vitamins are ones that you swallow and not chew.
Well, wait. Let's not take Rabbi Landis. Let's not take
You're
Rabbi Landis
talking about
literally.
the Flintstones. You get those little vitamins that your gummy bears?
No, I'm not talking. So there are vitamins that you can chew, and there are also vitamins that you swallow. And most adult vitamins are ones that you swallow. So if part of our concern is it looks like healing, then I'm not sure why a vitamin looks less like healing than whatever other pill.
Yeah,
I don't know about you, but I don't run around and stare at people's pills when they put them in their mouth.
We're not exactly. No, it's the opposite. It's not that we don't look at it's what is the thing you're doing? The thing you're doing is taking vitamin C. And the other guy, he's taking Tylenol. And it could be that the two capsules look exactly the same. But we're going to prohibit one and not prohibit the other. It's not because of what visually is perceivable without a microscope. It's because what is the act? The act is taking a Tylenol, or the act is taking a vitamin. They're two different acts, even though they may not be distinguishable visibly, but they're two different acts.
I know never mind. What I was also going to say is, in a situation where you have a food that you eat, both it's just like a regular food that you eat and you use it as a healing thing, perhaps nobody brought this up, so this is just me drashing, but like maybe it's more likely that if you use it as a medicine, you're going to use something that will bring up an issue of tochen or some other problem, right? That you prepare it differently, and someone looks at you and says, "You idiot, you shouldn't eat it like that." But you can eat it to heal yourself because clearly you're trying to heal yourself. So you would eat it in this other way. I don't know.
You know, there's you're saying like eating
Like
as so
maybe
is
okay, we have the grass water that you can drink, but maybe there's another grass water that's only used for healing, and you have it prepared like the grass water that's used for everything. And people are like, "You idiot, you should have ground it up and turned it into something else." But because you're clearly healing yourself by drinking it, I can go ahead and prepare it in a way that would involve something that's malacha.
that's the mistake they make.
Right, that's a mistake on other people's part.
In other words, they would see you drinking this liquid,
Or
and
maybe
they
you
would
think
say,
because you
"Oh,
can have it,
I
you can
maybe will
prepare it as
go and
well.
if he can drink that liquid, then I'll go and grind stuff and do it the right way."
Yeah.
And so therefore, we don't want you to drink the liquid either, right? But the Mishnah, back to the Mishnah says you can't eat hysops because people who are healthy, according to Rashi, well, if you should eno ma'achal b'riyim, it says in the Mishnah, it's not food that is eaten when you are healthy. Only sick people eat it. But these other things, both sick and non-sick people drink them so you can have them. All right, let's go on. So keep reading, Ori.
כל האוכלים אוכל אדם לרפואה, וכל המשקים שותה, חוץ ממי דקלים וחוס עיקרין, מפני שהן לירוקה. So all the foods that a person would eat for refuah, and
Well, what does it mean, all the foods?
you can't eat them.
No, ochel adam refuah.
Oh, sorry. All things that are essentially food. There you go. Kol
There you
chalim. A person can eat for refuah also. All drinks they could drink except for mei dekel, which is palm water. V'chos ikarin mipnei shehen liroka. I don't know what ikarin is, but they're for jaundice. People
Right.
know that associate them that you drink them for jaundice, not as a drink.
Even though it sounds like they are, I mean, if we contrast the ochlin, we already said that you can't eat hysops. Why you can't eat right izavyon? Because that's not a food, I guess. But then it says called ochli, but anything it is a food, you could eat for even if it's for a food, because it's a food after all. And then it says kol mashkin, seems to be like a stricture here now. All the mashkin, which people do drink, right? We're not talking about things that are not drunk. We're talking about mashkin, things that are drunk.
Not things you can drink, things that are normal drinks in
Things
society.
that are normal drink, exactly.
Yeah.
You could drink. And then we say chutz. But why do we also say chutz? Chutz from these two things.
Right.
Because
You're
they're
saying
for
those
jaundice.
two, even though they're normal drinks, we're going to limit them because they're so specifically for jaundice.
Even though people drink them when they don't have jaundice.
Or they're making a claim about reality. And in reality, there's no health drinks except for these two.
No, because we already said
world.
that you can't have those other drinks. You can't have the not grass water.
Abu
Right, we already
Roy.
said we already listed some things that you can't have because those are only refuah. It must be that this second part is talking about things that are legitimate drinks, but we're still going to prohibit it. Like I could give a modern example, like quinine tonic, which is, I mean, I don't think anybody prohibits you drinking quinine tonic nowadays, but it would almost sound from the Mishnah that since quinine tonic is drunk for malaria, then even though it's a drink, when you don't have malaria, you still can't drink it. Except that's not, the quinine was not in the list here. The list only has certain things. It has these certain things that are normally drunk, presumably, But you still anyway can't have them on Shabbat because they're for Yeruka, jaundice. And then it goes on. What about Mei Dekalim? We just said you can't have Mei
About
Dekalim.
Shotehu made kalim litzma'o, but you can drink it if you're very thirsty. V'sach shemen ikarim
Right.
shelo
So
hua.
it's very confusing. Oh, but now if you're really thirsty, you could drink it. Very,
Meaning,
very
don't drink
weird.
it like stam at the table as a pleasurable drink. But in a real case of thirst, you could drink it.
Right. If people see you're sweating and you came back from outside and you're really sweating and hot, and the only thing in the refrigerator is this mei de kalim, and it's clear that you're drinking it because you're very thirsty, then you can have it. But if you are just drinking it, then people will think, well, even though people do sometimes drink it when they're healthy, he probably is drinking it on Shabbat for refuah, and then I might think, oh, I can do refuah too. So it's like this kind of quasi state. It's like this middle ground drinks that are quite often used for refuah, but sometimes for drinking. And in those cases, you can only have it when it's very clear to the observer that you're doing it for sama and not for refuah.
The other possibility is that we don't want to be too restrictive. If you're really quite thirsty, we're not going to restrict it. Like it's not necessarily the part of the Buchamilta right now. It could just be the part.
But I don't think we would say
it's already a borderline drink you established.
But we won't say this by Shotei Abu Rua.
Well, maybe it's
not everything can you drink when you're thirsty.
Maybe it's not a viable thirst quencher.
Wait.
No, but I think that we're yeah.
Wait, Rav Nachum, you're allowed to drink the Abu Rua.
Okay,
yeah.
You're right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't have any drink that we can't drink.
Yeah, but I wonder. I wonder if the
no, we do. What about the
Kosi Karim?
Kosi Karim? Kosi Karim we didn't permit. We only permitted Mei de Kalim.
Well,
right. And it says v'sach shemen ikarin shelo l'refuah. But you can't drink Kosi Karin even for tzama. So I'm just saying there seems to be a middle case of something that is kind of default refuah unless proven otherwise by your sweatiness.
Or your healthiness, right? That's the Rashi there. He's like, if you're right, he says let's some yeah.
So Rashi's not like me. Yeah, Jacob, what do you got, Jacob?
Well, I'm also noting like what Rashi says about the Kosi Karin. Your Mashka coats in the tofu, like you're crushing things into it. It's getting to that like the connection with an actual malacha with crushing things with tofin. So that might be why it would be separate from Mei de Kalim. I don't know nature of Mei de Kalim.
Right, but maybe you made it before Shabbat. You're saying maybe you made it before Shabbat. You still can't drink it, I suppose.
Well, maybe it has to do with like maybe the perception of it as only going to be medicinal might be associated with the crushing things into it.
In other words, it's more medicinal.
Yeah.
It's more clearly medicinal than the Mei de Kalim.
Maybe.
Reuven?
I was trying to think of an example of a liquid like this, and I wonder if it has to do with how widely known a drink is, or how much a drink is associated with healing, even though it could just be like juice. Like my grandmother, Alea Shalom, always had prune juice in the fridge. She only drank it because it helps with constipation. But it is a juice. It's just it doesn't say that on the label that it's medicinal. It's just like, but people know it's known among.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. I'm just trying to think of.
Yeah, that's not a great example. No, what would be a better example? I think would be, I think Jägermeister. Not that I would drink that, but I think it's originally like a cough syrup kind of thing. But now people drink it. It's like an alcoholic beverage with like all kinds of spices in it, and it tastes kind of like cough syrup. And but people drink it as a drink now. because they've proven that it's not actually a cough syrup because modern medicine has dispelled that thought. But yeah, I think there's some things that are like default refuah. Like default is for refuah unless proven otherwise. Well, he says Rashi, although Rashi says it's different from me. He says litzama means if you're enoholit, that's it. You can't. So when the Mishnah said you couldn't drink it, this made dekalim, it just meant you couldn't drink it if you're sick.
Reading
That's-
back that phrase, that seems like that's sort of the pshat, right? Kol ha'ochlin ochel adam l'refuah. We're talking about all foods, right, that are normal foods. I can eat them, but it's not just saying I can eat them. I can eat them for refuah. So if you were to carry that, little bit into the seifa, it means kol hamashkin shotel l'refuah.
right.
You can drink it for refuah, which is why Rashi's modifier and made dekalim makes sense. But made
then
dekalim
why-
you can drink with some you can't drink it for refuah. If what your real intention is, for a second, you could drink it for a drink. We were just clarifying that if you're actually sick, you can't have made dekalim.
So it's repetitive, kind of.
That's the context of the ochlin.
It's kind of repetitive because we sort of should have figured that out. It said kol ochlin. We were talking about eating them for refuah, and when it said chutz, it must have meant that if it's not for refuah, you could drink it. But okay, fine, I agree with you.
No,
100%.
it's saying you can't drink it for refuah. You can't have made dekalim and
Exactly.
kosi karim for refuah.
That's what exactly it says. You could drink drinks for
normal.
refuah, except for this one, which you can't drink for refuah. And then it says, but if you're thirsty, you could drink it. But that was sort of implied when we said that you couldn't drink it for refuah. That would imply that you could drink it for not refuah. So it's kind of repetitive. That's what I'm saying. If he's samat, just repeating what we kind of already should have figured out from the first part. Fine, I accept that.
I don't see how it was already said. It said
Yeah,
you
because
can't
it said
have
kol
it.
ochlin ochel adam l'refuah, but kol mashkin shoteh l'refuah, like you're saying, chutz medekalim, which means you can't drink it for refuah. We only have a prohibition on eating it for refuah, but eating it if you're healthy, then you could. So that we don't need the statement unless you're thirsty. That's what I'm saying. But whatever, fine. But then but let's go on. Why are these things? Why
Wait,
is
so
it that most
but
things?
I can't eat medicine if I'm not sick, can I?
No,
Can I take an
ochlin.
aspirin for no reason?
No, that's not food. Kol ochlin.
Because it's not
Anything
really
that is food, you can eat,
I see.
even though you're doing it for food, because the onlooker will say you're just eating food. And all the mashkin you can drink, even though you're doing it for food, because the person will say you're just drinking mashkin. And then why does it say, except for medikalim?
Yeah.
Why are those an exception?
Also, what happens to
If they're a
kosi
drink, then the onlooker will say you're just drinking. So it must be that these are things, like we're saying, these are things that are like in the middle. They're not clearly, it's something that you would normally, you might drink it, but you might also drink it, but it's sort of more clear that it's for refuah. It's like 75% refuah and 25% people drink it. So therefore you don't, but most mashkim are 90% for eating. So therefore we'll go with that. Therefore we'll let you. This one, a little bit more clear that it could be for refuah. So therefore we don't let you do it for refuah. But other mashkim that your prune juice, maybe you could. Maybe some people drink it. Maybe a lot of people drink it for drink. Or your tonic water. But not this made dekalim, because it's but then I still have a problem with kol sheli karim. Anyway, Mishnahs are always problematic. Mishnahs
Yeah,
are
what
always
happens to kosi karim?
Yeah, what about kosi karim? What's the so that one you can't even if you are you can't
Not
drink it
sick.
for any reason on Shabbat, even if you're healthy.
Because it's basically a real medicine.
Yeah, but then why do we so why do we call it a mashke? Call it
Like you said, it's a boundary
medicine.
category. Some things are hard to categorize. They just defy the two groups.
So what's the general? Let's summarize. What's the whole general thing this Mishnah is telling us? Telling us, yeah. Well, I'll let you say.
Don't take medicine that appears to be medicine. And when things are a category of food or drink, then you can actually take them medicinally, generally, unless it's some kind of boundary category.
Right. I think that's right. Okay. Good. That's the way I want to learn.
Rav
Any
Nachum, just
question?
one
Yeah, Joel.
question. We have an example of a mashke that you can drink if you're, even though it's maybe often used for healing if you're thirsty. We don't have an example here though of an
Food.
ochel would be asur most of the time, but is permitted if you're just hungry and you're eating it, right? We don't have the
Right. I guess, yeah, I was thinking about that. And I guess that refuot are more likely potions, that like food is food. And if you're eating this hyssops, which is also it's not really a food, so you can't have it at all because nobody eats that. But anything that's food is considered food. But drinks are more questionable. Drinks are more questionable because, maybe it's an elixir. It's some kind of, elixirs and potions. Those are all liquids, right? All the things that medicine thinks about are always drink this thing and you'll be better. It's very rarely eat something. So I think that's the reason that foods are more clear cut. Either if it's food, it's food, and if it's not food and you're taking it, it must be medicine. Drinks, who knows what is it? What is Jägermeister? Is it a potion? You know what I mean? Certainly make a lot of people sick, I would say. All right. No, I hope nobody here is a big fan of Jägermeister. But because I may have insulted you. Let's look at Nun Gimel, another Gemara. So we got the most basic principle that we got there is you can't do something that is clearly looks like medicine taking. I mean, not in the sense looks like a person with a telescope would see, but that the explanation of the action is clearly a medical behavior, whether or not anyone's looking at you or not. Right? Right? It's not really marit ayin. It's not really marit ayin. It's just definitional. Is this definitionally a medical behavior? All right, so I'm turning to Nun Gimel.
I wanted to say that earlier because we learned this before. Muchach hamilta is a little different than marit ayin. It's more of like established category.
Exactly. It's definitional. Muchach hamilta. This action is a medical action, so you can't do it. It's not because if someone sees you. It could be alone in the woods. And it's not because what people right. It's just there's a category, it's categorical. There's a category. You can't do medicine. How do we define it? We define it by, is this thing only done by sick people? Okay, so somebody want to read the next piece? If not, I'll call on Joel, actually.
Okay. We're starting at the Tashma, right? Sachin.
Yeah, exactly. Tashma. Wait. Let me give you a little background.
Oh, I was going to give.
I'll give it back.
Okay,
the question. Tell me if you agree. The question is: do we worry about animals suffering on Shabbat? Yeah. In other words, do we care? Can we do things that maybe would be prohibited, or at least rabbinically prohibited, or somewhat prohibited? Can we do things that maybe we shouldn't be doing on Shabbat because an animal is suffering? That's actually a very relevant question, especially if you have a farm. Okay, so we're trying to prove it one way or the other, so go ahead.
All right. So Tashma. Sachinu mifar kesin le'adam ve'en.
Actually, you can skip that one.
Okay. Livhema. All right. Go to the next one. Tashma behema.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Tashma behema she'achs. Oh, that one's okay. She'achzadam.
You wanted that one in particular?
It's I just thought it was interesting, right? But because again, it's talking about putting some sort of salve or something like that on a makat, on a wound.
All right, so read that one. You can read. I just like to be shorter.
Yeah, you can put
read it in Hebrew.
All right,
Tashma sakin.
Right, so you can put a salve or some sort of paste, not paste, something like that on a person, but not on an animal on Shabbat. My love to ika makeh.
Well, sakin is like shemen.
Yeah. Oh, you guess oil. Yeah.
Rashi says shemen.
So
because we don't want to get into other
yeah,
thicker
it's a
thicker
thick paste that
substances.
yeah, that are oh it comes up I think in the Rashi somewhere in the sugya. But all right, but it sounds like you're allowed to essentially like help relieve a person suffering, but not an animal suffering. But this is what it's saying. Malav de ika makeu mishum sar, right? Is this not about you have a wound and it's because of SARS? You could put some sort of let's say oil then on a wound for a person, but not for an animal on Shabbos. Lo, right? Digamar maka umishum tanuk. No, we're talking about the wound is healed and now it's just for like to make you enjoy to
Right. So here, this is not really much of a proof about medicine because it's really, in the end, just saying you can put oil on your skin on Shabbat, even on let's say a scab,
So
because it's really just for enjoyment and not for healing. It'll heal anyway.
So okay.
Okay, good. And that you can't do for an animal because who says you should give him tanug? You don't have to. In other words, you shouldn't give. I mean, not that we're against animals having pleasure, but I guess sakin. I guess this rubbing of oil is somewhat questionable. I guess somewhat questionable behavior. We're only let you do it. We don't let you do it for your behemoth.
On
It's
Shabbos.
interesting. I mean, yeah, on Shabbos. I'm saying you can certainly do it on Wednesday. So why can't you do it on Shabbos?
Yeah.
If it's permitted on Shabbos for you, then why isn't it permitted for your behemoth?
It sounds like the kind of thing that's creeping into places where you wouldn't do it on Shabbos, but for the sake of Tanug, we didn't make a gezerah against it. But for if there's no Tanug, it's not for you.
It's kind of like refuah. You're saying it's even though it's not refuah because we established that it's not refuah. It's just tanug. Yeah, it's a little bit weird. A little bit another weird Gemara. Why would it be that if it's not refuah and you can do it on Shabbat, but you can't do it for your animal? Maybe you're worried that the hair, you'll pull out hairs or something.
Yeah. So, all right. Tashma, Beimashe Achzadam. This is, I think, in the four humors theory here, like that you've got a lot of blood. You're sanguine. That's the word. Sanguine is the
well, I think it means you got a fever.
Oh, you do? You think Achzadam is a fever? It's fine. I'll take that too. It's you do have to cool off of this.
Infodora. I don't know. I think that's like influenza, but maybe I'm wrong.
It's some sort of sickness.
I think Achzadam just means he got a fever.
Okay. So, right? So you can't put this animal in cold water so it will cool off, or just water so it will cool off. But you can do it to a person. So that sounds again like you can relieve a person's sa'ar, but not an animal's sa'ar on
right.
So, okay. Amar Ula, Gzera Mishum Shchikat Samamim. He says, no, this is a Gzera against grinding medicine. What's the something like that? I can't.
Yeah, medicine. In other words, you can't put a behemoth in cold water because we're worried. Doing refuah there. You're doing refuah for the behemoth. Look at Rashi.
Yeah, this is you're talking about the Gzera Mishum Shichat Samamim.
Yeah.
B'midei de refuah gazur rabbanan, right? So something that's about healing, the rabbis made a decree against it. The isharet shum refuah, if they allowed any refuah, ate lemishrei shchikat samamim, right? Then people would come to a permit or think that it was permissible to grind drugs on Shabbos. V'hu isura deoraita dehavitochan. That's a full blown isur, right? That's tchina.
So what huge leap is the Gemara, according to Rashi, making here?
If you allow any healing, people are going to come to grind drugs, right?
Exactly. In other words, you might have thought, well, you might say, well, I can, nowadays nobody grinds, or I can go into I don't know what. I can do some kind of refuah thing. I can go to an acupuncturist. He's not. He doesn't grind any medicines to do acupuncture on Shabbat. Why can't I do acupuncture? It doesn't even cause blood. There's no bleeding. Just, there's no bleeding. There's no possibility of grinding. We don't grind there. So why? So Rashi says, no, but and what's the proof of the Gemara? How is Rashi right? What are we saying is prohibited because of shchichat Samanim.
It's putting an animal in cold water, right? It's
Right,
not
taking
even,
taking an ice bath
yeah.
is prohibited for an animal because of you might grind something. There's no grinding involved in taking an ice bath. So you see that the refuah, it's really like what we said, what Landis said, and what we said in the beginning, or that I said, that it's a refuah is a prohibition looking for a reason.
Yeah.
We know that it's prohibited, and we're going to prohibit all refuah because of this one thing. Because maybe you'll grind, but it doesn't have anything to do, even if there's no connection to grinding, because what could be further from grinding than going in cold water?
But should I keep going? Ihachi?
Yeah.
All right, Ihachi Adam Nami. Wait a second. Why can you put a person in cold water? Then a person should also be prohibited to go in cold water on Shabbat. Adam near Ekemekar. It looks like the person's just cooling off. Ihachi Beima Nami near Ekemekar. So just
Oh wait. So wait a second. What does it mean that it looks like he's
again, this is
cooling
like
off?
similar to the ochlin, just like it looks like you're just eating. Here, it just looks like you're taking a bath because it's hot out, not because you're sick
Right.
and you're trying to heal. Right.
Exactly. If you're taking a cold bath, you just like to take cold bath. People take cold baths. I mean, you can't take a you take a cold bath. Maybe you shouldn't put empty a lot of ice cubes into it. That might make it more clear that you're doing it for medical reasons.
But and so we say Iachi Bemanami near Kamekar. So make Kamekar. So why doesn't it look like the animal's just cooling off? Ain Mekar live Hema, right? Then animals don't cool off in baths, essentially, is at least we don't do it.
Look at Rashi.
Yeah, let's see. Ain Mekar Behema, Ain Derech Leaker Behema, right? It's not the normal way of people to cool off animals. I don't think it's that the animal would cool off that way. We don't put them in baths.
Yeah, we don't put animals into cold water just to cool them off. We do it for medical reasons.
So
Hilchot.
Right? So everyone's going to know why you putting the animal in cold water, because your intention is to heal it. And then we're going to permit the grinding of drugs.
Right. The people will come to say, "Oh, you can do refuah. I'm going to grind up my medicine and because I saw that you did refuah for your behemoth."
All right. And now we have a question though. Wait a second. Villa behema, not me gazrina. Wait, do we make zero?
Have you got some reading first?
Ori, you're not on mute. Wait, can I mute him?
There you go.
I continue.
All right. Do we make gezerot about behema and Shabbos? Right. V'atanya hayta omeret chutz latchum. Korela, right? If your animal's outside the chum, you could call your animal on Shabbos to come to you. V'hiba, and it comes. V'lo gazrina and dilma atila tuye, and we don't make a gezerah unless you come to like carry your animal or maybe to move your animal outside the techum or back inside the techum, something like that. So no, there's no gezerah. V'amaravina
Wait, look at Rashi. Mi gazrina.
Mi gazrina b'makom seda kihai gavnad, right? In a place where you're going to have a loss, right? Like your animal might die.
In other words, right. In other words, the animal might die of this fever if you don't cool them off.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to not let you cool them off.
Exactly. So
now what is Rashi next? Rashi chutz the tchum.
Yeah, kal sakadate chutz the tchum shelo. Right now the Gemara is thinking that it's outside his tchum, which the answer is going to be it's outside the animal's tchum. Hayta omeret behema. That's outside the person's tchum. The
right. He thinks that the animal is outside my tchum. Mm-hmm. So wait, go back to the Gemara.
Right. And so korela v'hiba v'lo gazrin until ma'atila tuye. Right. And we you're allowed to call the animal and it comes, and we're not concerned that because you're allowed to call it, you're going to actually come to take the animal.
To take the animal and go out of your tchum.
Yeah. So
you see that we don't go there. There's also pseida. Maybe your animal needs to be brought in. Wolves might eat him. So we don't make a gezerah there. So why do we make a gezerah here?
All right,
but now we say no. You misunderstood that Mishnah. By the way, we saw this Mishnah. We learned this whole story when we talked. Right?
We did. Yes.
We learned this whole story, and now we're going to actually get a correction on our way we understood it. We understood it wrong before, according to this Gemara.
Because that was about going to the end of your tchum and calling your animal, right, on Shabbos.
Right. And now we're saying no. B'hatanya.
Ve'amaravina kagon shayat tchum shala muvla b'toch tchum shalo. It's like when its tchum is is within your Tehum. In other words, it's outside of, it can't come any further, but you
You
can
could go all the way to him.
Yeah.
But for him, the animal, this is very weird. I never
know.
knew this. Animals have a tomb. Animals can't go outside of their tomb. Animals have to keep Shabbos.
Animals, or is it the owners? Like, what if
It's the
it's
animals I can read the Rashi. It's the animals to whom. It's like it's a little strange. Like the animal has a limit where it can go. I'll read the Rashi here. Shayat tchum shala muvlat betoch tchum shalo. The chusta tchum the ketani chusta tchum shala shebeima hamisura leroeh hamiyuchad harehi kiragle haroeh. Right. So this is like a shepherd gives you their animal, and it has the tchum of its owner on Shabbos, and you have your tchum. Right.
So the animal has the tomb of its owner, and it's not your animal.
So,
right? It's not your animal. It is your animal, but you gave it to a shepherd. You hired a shepherd, and so now it gets the tomb of the shepherd. And now he can't go outside of the shepherd's tomb and come to you.
And this is the one that's called its owners. Shabbat, karov leoto makom. Right? Right? So even though it's gone,
even though you could reach it, you can't push it, you can't drag it, you just can call it. You can like walk up to the animal and say, "Come here." So we thought was calling the animal because outside Tchum meant like he's far away and you're calling him and you can't reach him. No, you could reach him. You could go around him. You could walk around a circle around him, but you can't touch him. Because if you touch him, then you're causing him to go outside of his tchum.
Yeah, you can call an animal to violate its tchum on Shabbos. You just can't physically do it via night.
Yeah, this is bizarre. I don't know. I was just totally, to me, it's a totally weird thing. I mean, I know that you can't, an animal, there is. You have to let everybody rest. But I didn't know that also resting for an animal means he can't go out of tchum.
So. But right? It can only go 4 amot at that point. So you couldn't with your diadayim take it beyond that 4 amot, but you can call it umihu korela. Unless you can call it fihiba, and it comes delohu zarhu al tchum behemto, because you're not actually. There's no warning. There's no prohibition against you causing the animal to violate its tchum. As long as you don't do it with your hands, right? It's like
which is totally weird. I don't know. I just keep saying this. Totally weird to me. That you're not prohibited from making the animal violate his tchum. You just can't. But for sure, the animal has a tchum. Okay. So that's what Ravina says, and therefore what? And therefore we don't have a proof that we don't have proof that
we don't make gezerot about animals.
That we are lenient about gezerot when the animal might die. And therefore we would understand why you can't put the animal in the cold water. Really, he's going to have to die. You have to let him die.
All right. So Rabban Gamliel Bar Yitzchak Amar Shchichat Samamim Gufa Tanahi. It's that the whole question about the gezerah of grinding a medicine on Shabbos is itself a Tanaitic dispute.
Look at Rashi.
Hold on a second. Tanahi deika delogazar shar refuot atu shchichat samim. There are those Tanaim that don't have a gezerah against other healings because non-grinding, medicine.
Right. So wait, somebody other than Joel, explain this Rashi.
Okay.
Can I call on Reuven?
Yes, of course. Okay, so Rashi is saying that there are Tanaim who don't say that we make a gezerah atu shchikat samanin. So there are those who say, Oh, sorry.
About shar. Explain what is shar refuot.
Shar refuot. Maybe that means any refuah beyond actual crushing, things that involve crushing or grinding, like any other possible action that leads to refuah.
Right. That's what it seems like Rashi is saying. So in other words, putting an animal in cold water, which is far detached from grinding. There are some tonight would say there's no gezer on that. It's true they might prohibit you eating some elixir, drinking some potion, even though you didn't grind anything for it, because you might come to grind. Josie, you have a question?
Sure, it seems to go against Rev Landis's original, supposition that refuah equals making some kind of drug or crushing something. Here you've got the class of refuah that is sitting there with your mortar and pestle and making something, and then you've got refuah, which is some other treatment, going to a hot bath, going to a cold bath, doing something,
Right.
standing with your arms akimbo, that kind of thing, wrapping in. So there are treatments that are not, setting a bone, right, which is a different class of thing altogether, I realize, but there's refuah that is grinding medicine for poultices or drugs, and then there's refuah, which is taking a bath.
Right. Refuah is that exactly, and there's some Tanaim, according to this Rashi, that seem to hold that we goes there only on the ones that are associated with grinding, that could lead to grinding, but not on taking a cold bath.
Although he doesn't give an example.
He doesn't give an example.
And by the fact he doesn't give an example, it is that those other ones are so far-fetched in terms of, or far out of it from being refuah. They're not pushing what Josie is saying far away. I'm just saying, I'm noticing that. I'm noticing that and giving a possibility.
What does Rashi say? The ikad the lo gazer shar refuot atu
I know,
shlichatzo.
but he doesn't. We're all trying to figure out what a shar refuah is.
Right. What is
So I'm
shar
saying is a shar refuah is out of the line of regular refuah.
Right. Although, I mean, alternatively, you could read it as shar refuah. There's no gezer at all. Lo gazru shar refuot atu shlichatzo.
Yeah, but
They
what's
did
a
it.
shar refuah?
Oh, it could just mean all refuah that don't involve
All
actual
refuah
grinding.
that's not actually grinding.
So
I'm reading.
what is that?
So then there's no gezer at all.
But what is that shar refuah?
That's taking a bath in the
That's-
river.
I know
That's
you're
no.
giving you.
No,
I
it could
know
even
you're
be-
making up
Oh
examples.
no, it also could be you ground the medicine before Shabbos, and
Yeah,
now
exactly.
you're
You ground the medicine before Shabbos.
It could be the shar refuah is just not a real refuah. That's all. It's not under the designation of refuah.
No, but it could be anything that is not actually grinding. So if you
I
ground it before
agree with
Shabbat,
you. I agree with you. I'm not saying no, but I'm saying he gives. Oh, I'm repeating myself. He gives no examples. So therefore,
no
anything that's outside is no regular refuah.
yeah, it's not clear exactly. It's not clear. Well, let's see. Maybe actually this is a Tanaim, so maybe the Tanaim will explain it. So go on, Joel.
All right. Titania. All right, here's the Breita. Behema she'achla karshinim. All right, so this animal eats a lot of, I think we call it vetch, some sort of thing that's going to make its stomach constipated of some sort. Lo yiritzena bechatzer bishvil shetitra fat. You shouldn't run it around the courtyard so that it will loosen its bowels, right?
Exactly. So that sounds like an example of a refuah. That's why I was influenced by the continuation of the Gemara. That sounds like a refuah that's far removed from grinding. So you're just exercising.
Mm-hmm.
You're just making the animal go for a run. That's your refuah. And this says you could do it.
Well,
no,
lawyer
said you can't do it.
Can't do it, but Rabbi Yoshaya matir. Rabbi Yoshaya says it's allowed. So, and then we have this Darash Rava halacha ki Rabbi Yoshaya. He says the halacha follows Rabbi Yoshaya. So,
which is what? That you could.
That you could, this animal that has got, this pain in its stomach, you can run it around the yard to help it out, to help it feel better.
So now this is what we started the shear before, the pre-shear with me and Joel, we were discussing this exact question. Because if the halacha is like Rav Oshia, what does that mean? Does it mean that anything like taking a cold bath is permitted or running in order to clarify, and that would be permitted for people and animals? Or is it saying only for animals was there a question in the first place? And then for people, for sure, there is a gezerah, but for animals, there isn't. That makes sense? That makes sense.
Yeah, it would. And then for
What? That for animals, we mean we'd be more lenient for animals?
yeah, maybe do have a principle that in general we avoid gezerot for animal, or we don't because
But we had then why couldn't you put the animal in the cold water?
yeah, that's the we never really answered that in that sense. Like it sounds like maybe that one's just like too obvious, or I don't know. It's
Or maybe that's holding like this other opinion.
exactly that was what you say. It holds like whoever the Tanakama is or the Breita, right? So
Right. But by people, so in other words, the question is, does this extend to people? Do we say that taking a cold bath, well, we already said that taking a cold bath is permitted because anyway, it looks like healthy people take cold baths. But what about putting a ice bath? Maybe that you couldn't do, maybe we said. And then maybe now we're saying maybe you could because maybe low gazru, and maybe we paskin like they don't gazru on things that are far removed from grinding. That's a very big question. Steinsaltz reads it as dafka by behemoths. And that by people, no, we do go there. There's actually a dalet here on this. What does the dalet say? Maybe we should look that up. You know what? Let's take a break now, and that'll give me time to look up this dalet, and we'll see we'll see the answer. In Shin Lamed Bet, it says, "Ein mialdin et a behema b'Shabbat." You can't do. I'm just starting at the beginning. You can't help an animal give birth on Shabbat. Ein mefarchim behema idile maka. You can't treat its wounds. Hanimili de gemar maka deleka ele mishum tanuk. Aval de tchilat maka de iketzar shari. That's sort of the opposite of what we thought. In other words, you can't do it for tanuk, but you could do it if it's tsar. You could put oil.
I think it's the way we kind of ended up in that, the way we understood
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
that's the way we ended up. Well, we said the tanug is why you couldn't do it, right? So you're saying if it would be for a makkah, you could do it. Okay, I just thought I thought kol shekain you can't do it for
Makkah. Yeah.
Anyway, ve'im akla karshina. Here's our case. Karshini, and if you ate this dangerous plant, harbe umitztaeret yachol ha'aritza b'chatzer kedei shetagia that she'll get worn out and get healed. Ve'im achaz adam, and if she got very hot, yachol amida b'mayim kedei shetitztanen. You can let her get cold in the cold water. All right, stop there. So,
yeah.
what?
But that's against the Breita we read and following Rabbi Oshaya, right? It's essentially saying that the Breita was not a pida.
Yeah, we're rejecting the Breita that says you can't put it in water. It's because it's going like a Tanakama, and we're holding like Rabbi Oshaya. But what does it mean? It means that when we said we go like Rabbi Oshaya, it's about behemoths. But what about people? People, we have another reason why we let them take a cold bath because maybe they're doing it. They're not. It's not clear that they're doing it for refuah. But if it would be clear, then you couldn't probably.
Yeah, actually, Rav Nachum, do you see the Magen Avraham in Bet there?
I closed it already, but you could. I'll listen. Go ahead.
I'll read it. Let me that you can't put you're allowed to put the animal in cold water. Someone's not, their mind isn't so like confused or distracted on healing their animal that they'll come to grind drugs, as opposed to if you're sick and you need refuah, you're going to come to do something like this. This is
very important. It's very important. So the machloket that we saw, the Tanaitic machloket of how far the gezerah, extends, was only a question by animals, and wasn't a question. It was not a question by people. By people, for sure, it extends to anything. Sorry. We thought we had a Hana who was going to be lenient, but we lost him. All right. Now let's go to our Siman and the tour. Shin, Kaf Zayin. And here, maybe Jacob, you want to read in the tour?
Sure. Hachkoshes b'matnav lo yisoch shemen v'chometz. Aval sachu shemen levado. So one who's like worried or like has like a
Concerned.
concern about his like loins, I guess. He can't rub oil and vinegar, but he can rub oil by itself.
Right.
Vafilu b'shemen vered makom shehu mitzoi shederach b'nei adam l'soch bo. Afilu b'lo refuah. Al makom she'eno mitzoi asor. And he can even use rose oil in a place that it's common for people to rub it in, even if it's even for not healing, because then there wouldn't be the perception of healing on it.
Wait. So why can he? Yeah, go ahead. No. So what's the story of this Shemin Vered oil, like rose oil? I've heard of rose water. This is rose oil.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly what.
No, but what's the din? What's the din?
Well, the din is that if he's in a place that people commonly anoint themselves with rose oil for like pleasure or non-refuah purposes, that he's allowed to do it. Even if, presumably, even for this choshesh, where it could be for refuah, but it has to do with perception, I guess, that it wouldn't.
Right. This is just like the food case.
Yeah.
It's just like the food case that we saw in the Mishnah. So too, rubbing oil, even though you're doing it for refuah, but people like to anoint themselves with oil. People wake up in the morning and they put oil on their skin, and that's their part of their morning ritual. So you could do it too, even vered oil, which is especially good for refuah, presumably, but you could only use it if people in that area used it even for not refuah purposes.
Yeah. Right. About Malcolm to Animatsoy Asor.
Right.
But if it's not common, it's prohibited.
Because then it's clear that you're doing it for refuah. So let's go back to the Beit Yosef.
Okay. Should I start from the beginning of the Beit Yosef?
Yeah.
Mishnah besok parak shmona shiratzim. Vitam isor devarim elu pnei she'asor lasel shum refuah b'Shabbat. Kmo she'yavo b'siman she'achar zeh.
Right. You can't do any refuah on Shabbat, and this counts as one of those refuahs, like we're going to explain in the next Siman. Okay, go on.
Umasha
katav.
Yeah, Maskatav, right. Some the Mishnah Sachot Hashemen Aval Lo Shemen Bered. The name Malachim Achin Shemen Bered Al Gabe Makotehem B'Shabbat. Shekein Deracham L'Sof B'Chol. Rabbi Shimon Omer Kol Yisrael B'nei Malachim Heim. Right, so there in the Mishnah, Shiratzim, one can anoint himself with oil, but not rose oil. Princes can anoint with rose oil on their wounds on Shabbat because it's the way that they normally do it on Chol.
Right.
Shimon
So
says,
princes, it just seems like a derech chol, just so they can do it. In other words, they do it. I really shouldn't say. We really should have said to darkan the stuff when they're healthy.
right.
But either way, that's the same idea. I think it doesn't mean.
Yeah.
Rabbi Shimon says what?
Rabbi Shimon says all of Yisrael is princes, so we shouldn't have any problem putting rose oil on ourselves on Shabbat.
Even though
it might be for refuah.
and does Reb Shimon think that every Jewish person is putting on oil of roses on chol and when it's not sick?
I doubt it.
Exactly. So why does he say that they're all malachim? What's the logic of what he's saying? Or is there any logic to what he's saying? In other words, if in reality they don't, I'll answer my question.
I mean, like the Kol Yisrael Bnei Malachim hymn is like a general svara that we see a few places. In my head, the way that if I were kind of turning it into like natural formal language, I'd do it as nothing is too fancy for standard Shabbos practice.
Yeah, exactly. Even though they don't do it, they're like formalistically they're considered b'nei melachim, and therefore they're in that category, and therefore nothing is too fancy for Jewish people, even though the svara doesn't make any sense. In other words, it's clear that he's doing it for refuah because he doesn't normally do it, but we're going to categorize him as a b'nei melachim, which is interesting.
It makes sense because it's norms. We're saying we apply those norms to us. Again, it's not
even
about
though Lamaisa, the Jews are not using olive oil, using rose oil.
Right. But
and therefore,
it's not good
onlooker,
that it's maaseh chol. It doesn't matter if the individual does it. It matters if it's a normal practice. So we're just saying we're going to apply the norm.
But it's not a normal practice for the Jews. If it would be, then he would have
a known cultural norm.
What's a known cultural norm?
Let me put it a different way. We know that B'nai Melachim do it, so we know of the norm. It's true that I'm not rich enough to do it, but I know about the norm, and therefore I can apply that norm on Shabbat. It's Mocha Milta, not Marid Ayin. It's definitionally in our consciousness that that's something that you can do during the week.
Right.
You do it.
Yeah, okay, I hear you. You said it nicely. Okay. So that's Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon says that we all can do it, even though. And now, so go on. Perish Rashi.
Perish Rashi aval los semen vered.
That's just the quote, right? That's just the quote of the Gemara. And now he's going to explain. What does Rashi say?
Lefi shedama vikarim be'enu mitzvoi mucha mil the refuah avid.
So it's clear that he's doing it for refuah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Sheken darchan lesof b'chol below maka. Right.
See, Rashi is sensitive to exactly our problem.
Exactly.
Chol, he says no, it's below maka. That's the main point.
Yeah.
The main point is that they're healthy and they do it. So therefore, when they do it now, they could be. It's not proof that they're doing it for refuah. But Gemara, now that Beit Joseph is going back, and the Gemara is going to go on about what's the halacha, because we have a machloket. But Gemara,
Amar Rav halacha Rabbi Shimon, v'lo mitameha. Arish b'Gemara dehachi Amar halacha Rabbi Shimon, Ari v'lo mitameha.
Mitameh, I think you say mitameh, not because of his reasons.
Right.
In other words, the halacha is like him, but not for his, not because of the reasons that he gave.
Right.
He's going to explain why.
The Ilu Rabbi Shimon Avar afal gavdos seach sari. The Rav's avar ischach din ilos seach lo. That's right.
Okay, so wait, let's explain that.
So if the so for Rabbi Shimon, he's holding, even if we don't find it, even if it's not common, he would permit it.
But
And
Rav,
Rav's holding that if it's common, yes, it's permitted. If it's not common, no, it's not.
so he doesn't seem to that doesn't seem to be the same halacha as Reb Shimon at all.
Yeah.
But yet the Gemara says it is the same halacha as Reb Shimon. So go on, but it's just
Yeah.
not for his reasons.
Yeah.
Because he has to go. So go on. He'll explain why.
Uve atre de Rav's sicha mis de varda uferish si Ravim como hudasara de sachin shemen varad below muchamilta. All right, and then like
Okay.
the house of Rav,
No,
it
in
was
his makom, in his
place.
his place.
Right. It was common to anoint with rose oil. And Rashi explains Rob was permitting it in his place specifically that you can anoint with rose oil, and this is not strengthening this idea
So
around.
how is it possible to say that Rav is holding like Reb Shimon, just not for his reasons?
Rob's holding, well, I'm actually in the category of B'nai Melachim, or I have the money to be such.
Or not just me personally, but my town.
Yeah.
In other words, he's saying all the Jews could do it because in my town that is the reality. So it's kind of bizarre. He's not really posketing like Rav Shimon. He's just sort of saying, when in my area, I paskin for my area. I don't paskin for the whole world. I paskin for my area. So I want to paskin the same as him, that everybody's allowed. But that's because everybody really is using it. I don't hold by this idea that just because we're technically b'nei melachim, therefore, even if you wouldn't have it normally, you could use this rose oil. No, but it happens to be that in my area, people do have this rose oil. Okay. Here, let me have somebody else read. Josie, maybe?
Sure, where are we picking up here? Pasku Arif?
Yes.
Pasku Arif, Viharosh, Halacha Karav, Vichem Pasak Harambam, Viperak 21. V'im came lo kaimalan Karav Shimon. Viharan.
Go ahead.
Did I make an egregious mistake here?
No. I just said right. I said yes.
Okay. Haran katav shirabenu Hananel uva'al halachot gedolot pasku k'Rabbi Shimon.
So we have a machloket here. Do we pass in like Rav Shimon or like Rav?
It's they're the same. It's the same end result, but which reason is the one that is?
Well, no. It would be a different halacha. According to, if we really would pass like Rav Shimon, then every Jew could use this vered oil. In other words, then let's expand it out. Anything that's done by some people for refuah, for not refuah, even if in your locality it's only done for refuah, you could still do it because there are people that do it regularly in some other place. That's what Rav Shimon says. But Rav says no, it has to be that in your place they are using it. Then they're using it for non-refuah purposes. Then you can use it for refuah purposes. So now he says le'inan halacha.
Inyan halacha kevan sheharif harambam v'harosh zichron levracha maskimim the halacha karav hachinaktinan. So the Beit Yosef is going to say that the Rif and the Rambam and the Rosh all together are the way we're going to receive this halacha,
Which means what?
which means that that you can use it, assuming that it's in a place where people would normally use it.
We're going to use it when they're not sick, right? If people use it when they're not sick, then you can use it. But we're not going to give a general, even if some other place, if in Bulgaria they use olive, this special, because they make a lot of rose oil over there, but that's in Bulgaria. You're not in Bulgaria, so you can't use it on Shabbat. Okay, go on. Ve'ikal meidach.
V'ika lameda hachishare lasuch shemen al gabe makeh v'ha beperek Rabbi Eliezer de Mila Amarav ein monin hamin v'shemen me'al gabe makeh v'shabbat v'shmuel amar noten chutz l'makeh v'shotet v'yored l'makeh. So we have this this sort of interesting comparison here, that we're permitted to,
Well, it's more than just a comparison.
We have actually
What is it?
Shmuel a little bit later when they talk
It's
about
it's a contrast. It's a contrast. It's heichi shari. What does that mean?
how is he permitting this here
Right.
to rub oil when over here by Mila
On a makkah, on a wound.
on a wound specifically, because by Mila he says you can't you can't do this on a makkah, and Shmuel says you can put it around it and move your arm up and down to cover the wound. So you can't smear it on, but you can sort of shake it on.
So what's the kasha?
So Vitanya Kavati.
What's the kasha? Where Rav says
Rav
that
says you
could
can't
put
put
it
it on
on,
at all.
and also by Amila he says you can do it. Amar Rav, ein monin chamin v'shemen me'al gabei hamakai. You don't prevent the putting of oil. But Shmuel says different. So what's the kasha? I don't see a kasha. Somebody sees a kasha here? Shmuel, it's true. Shmuel says you can't put it directly on the makkah, but you can put it nearby. V'shotet v'yored l'makkah, and you can let it drip on.
So how is it? I mean, it's on the one hand, I don't stop someone else from doing it. On the other hand, I'm permitting it. There's a
Well, Rav said you could do it, and Shmuel said you couldn't do it. Ein monim just is a way of saying it's allowed. So, but the problem is that he's going to go on. The problem is from the next part. V'tanya kavte de Shmuel. That's the problem. What does that mean?
So that we sort of conclude this in the Braita in using Shmuel's logic,
Which means
that you can put it around, but you can't put it directly.
you
on
can't
your
put it on. So now we have a kasha. How can we pass like Rav over here, and then the Brisa says we're passing like Shmuel over there? It's actually a kasha on the Rambam and on the Rosh.
and
Really?
on the Reef.
And the Reef. So how could we, right? So we should paskin like Rabbi Shimon here, maybe, and not like Rav. So Yesh Loimar.
Yesh lamar d'sha'anei sicha shehu devar mu'at.
No, sorry, I take it back. Wait a second. I said that wrong. Either way, according to Rabbi Shimon and they both permit you to put this stuff on. So our Gemara is for sure saying you can put oil on. And then we have another Gemara that says you can't. You can only put it nearby. So it's not a kasha on the Rambam. It's a kasha between the Gemaras. Yesh Lomar.
Yesh lamar d'sha'anei sicha shehu devar mu'at.
Oh, wait, stop there.
Yesh lamar is saying that rubbing is you're not smearing over. It sounds like you're not smearing over a large area. Devar mu'at, it's a small thing.
Right. Putting a little oil on is permitted, but putting a lot of oil like a Brit Milah would be, which is hard to imagine because Brit Milah baby is very small, but
That's also a very small thing, so that doesn't.
exactly. It's a bit hard to understand that, but maybe the amount, maybe it's not the area, but the amount of oil you put on is greater.
Or the percentage of body surface covered.
Yeah, the ratio between the oil and as you soak the baby with oil, but by your makkah, you're only allowed to put a little bit on.
והתוספות כתבו שם, דפלוגתא דרב ושמואל, דמעוברין יחד, so that there's this the disagreement between Rav and Shmuel, דמעורבים יחד, that they're sort of mixed together. The kol chad ba'apei nafshei mutar. That each one sort of permits it in their own. I'm not sure exactly, but apei nafshei is
on its own. The kol chad ba'apei nafshei, or on its own.
Each one will be a permitted.
Or individually. The kol chad ba'apei nafshei mutar.
Kidetnan, as we have this other Mishnah, aval sachu et hashemen v'hainu afilu al gabe makeh.
Makkah.
Sorry. So here that we have this other Mishnah on 111a that when they talk about sach, they're talking about specifically on a wound, and even on a wound. The katav bahagahot per kaf aleph the ein tachin v'shuman v'chalav lefi shenimche v'havale nolad. So we can't do this with we can't smear with fats and
thicker substances like fat or chalev.
That because it's like nola. You're creating something that wasn't there effectively.
Maybe because it's like it was hard and then it becomes soft. In other words, as you took a hard substance and you start rubbing it and heating it up, and now it turns into an oily substance that you rub on the makkah. So maybe that's like nola. You created a nice dressing for your wound, or whatever, a nice oil out of something that was not an oil.
So we talk about this in the next Siman.
Yeah. Right. So I didn't get a clear. The Tosfos we didn't really look in. I guess it's not. We really have to look at the Tosfos to get a clear understanding, unless somebody has some insight about that Tosfos.
I think what it's saying is that the case that's being quoted is saying like it's about chamin vishemen. So I think what Tosfot is saying is that if it were just chamin or just shemen, that would be
say common. What do you mean common?
Chamin. In monin chamin vishemen.
Oh, thank you. Right, chamin vishemen. In other words, Tosfos. Thank you. Yeah, that's right. In other words, Tosfos says the problem is that it's salad dressing. It's vinegar, it's water and oil together, which we saw actually is more of a problem than just oil by itself. Very nice. Thank you. Very nice. Yeah. Now here, read the next bit here.
Sorry, I lost. Venerally.
Here's the bit Yosef is going to paskin.
Venerally, kevan shebizman hazeh ein anu regilin lasoch b'shum shemen kish'anu bri'im asur lasoch shum shemen al gabe hamakah v'shabbat devadai muchta milta derefu avid. So the Beit Yosef is going to paskin basically we don't smear oils and other similar types of, I guess, just
the ancient Romans didn't use soap. They would just cover their bodies with oil and then take like a clamshell and rub it off and scrape it off. And that's how they took a shower. That's how they cleaned themselves. So there was a lot of oil use. And maybe in the 15th century or wherever, people weren't using oil in that way so much. So he's saying for nowadays, we shouldn't be allowed to. Nobody's using oil. Now, before you get too excited, look at the Shulchan Aruch on this first Siman. on his first seif. And guess how the Shulchan Aruch paskins? Very funny. Because he just said nearly that you can't do it. Right? Shin Kaf Zayin in the Shulchan Aruch.
This is V'im hu makom shematzoy bo shemen vered v'derech b'nei adam l'socha afilu below refuah mutar. That's how he ends that before the Haggadah.
Wait, read it all. Hachosh. Hachoshesh.
Hachoshesh b'matnav lo yosech shemen v'chometz aval sachu shemen levado.
Right, exactly. Oh, that's kind of like the Tosfos. You can't mix them together.
Mishum de mucha hamilta the refuah ka'avid.
Right.
So
go ahead.
Rose oil, because that's obviously a healing oil.
But first of all, he said, "Avasachu b'shemen levado." You could use oil. He just said now, nearly, that you can't because nobody is doing shemen. Now he says you can. Why? Why does he say that? Because he's just quoting the Torah. The Torah says exactly those words. He's quoting the Torah. So he's passing against himself. That's why I say it's kind of funny. He's passing like the Torah. In other words, on the one hand, he feels what he feels. On the other hand, he's trying to write a halacha for all dorot, for all future generations. And he doesn't know if in the future people will start using oil again or not. So he's giving the basic halacha. The basic halacha is you could. V'im hu makom shematzui bo shemen vered v'derech b'nei adam l'socho afilu below refuah muter. So that's it. He doesn't even bring anything in, but if they don't do it, he doesn't mention anything about shemen. He leaves it to you to figure that out yourself or to remember what he wrote in the Beit Yosef. But now the Ramah says, I remember what you wrote in the Beit Yosef. And look at the Ramah says, but if nobody would use oil except for refuah, but call shemen asur, then it would be asur in all of them. And in parentheses, Beit Yosef. So
what you're doing there is what he's saying.
What?
I saw what you did there. The Ramah is saying
exactly. The Ramah says, I read you, and you're correct. But you see this kind of faithfulness that the Shulchan Aruch has to the Torah, and this will come up many, many times. That the Shulchan Aruch and the Beit Yosef gives his whole opinion, and then when you read the Shulchan Aruch, he just quotes the Torah. Because and you have to explain it. You have to understand why he's doing that. I think it's because he felt his chiddush is obvious. He doesn't need to say it. Basic halacha is still the basic halacha. All right. Somebody I didn't call on wants to read a little more. Isaac, go ahead. Isaac, so let's go back to the tour. Sif bet in the tour.
Okay, bait. Okay, סכין ממשמשים בכל הגוף להנאתו, ועל ידי שינוי, כגון שסך וממשמש ביחד, אבל לא יסוך ואחר כך ימשמש, וכן לא ימשמש ואחר כך יסוך, ולא ימשמש אלא ברפיון ידיים, אבל לא בכוח. Okay. So you can pour this oil on yourself and like rub it in, I think is what they're saying here. All over your body in order to, just because it feels nice. But you have to do it a little differently using a shinui. For example, you pour it on and you rub it in at the same time. But you don't pour it on and then after rub it in. Because that's the normal way you do it. And thus also you wouldn't, this doesn't make sense. You wouldn't like rub and then pour.
Yeah, you think of like a massage, like I guess.
Yeah, but that wouldn't work, right? Like you need the massage oil to not give someone like rug burn with your hands.
Yeah, I don't know.
I imagine that was like rubbing it between your hands first and then putting it on.
Oh, that makes sense.
Lo yimashmesh v'achar kach yisok. That is, you shouldn't like rub your hands together and then put oil on. Is that what you're saying, Joel?
Yeah, that's the way I understood it. Yes.
Yeah, that's the same. That's the same as what I was saying. No. In other words, do the manipulations and then put the oil. Shouldn't do. You should do it together. That's a shinui. In other words, I guess it's like, I don't know how you do it together exactly. I guess you with one hand you're pouring the oil, and the other hand you're rubbing. And you're doing it a little bit unusual way. I mean, why do you have to do it in an unusual way?
Do you say why do you do it in an unusual way?
Yeah, why do you think he's saying this?
Because it's Shabbos and we often do things with shinui.
Because it's like, what? It's a malacha? It's not a malacha.
No, it's not a malacha, but does he give a reason? He doesn't give a reason here in the tour. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the Beit Yosef.
Yeah, so am I. It says,
yeah,
third
so
line,
they're
Tana
worried about
Rabbanan.
scraping.
If you look at it says, let's see where it says Sham, and then it's just like the third line by me. Tana Rabbanan, Sachin, Misham Shemin, Bebene Me'ayin. You can, like, I guess, rub your belly, I guess. B'Shabbat, Ubilvad, Shelo Yaseh Kederech, Shu Oseh B'chol. Can't do it the normal way. Hechi Avid Rev Chama Bar Chanina, Amar Sach, V'achar Kach, Mimashmesh. First you put the oil and then you rub. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Sach Mimashmesh. You put the oil and you Mimashmesh Batachat at the same time. Upaskwa Poskim to Rabbi Yochanan. But we still don't get a reason, really.
Yeah,
I still don't
you
have a
give
reason.
It's like a hecker for yourself, either for others or for yourself, that it's different.
Yeah, I understand it, hecker, but what's the fear?
The previous line
The
of the
fear
Beis Yosef
So
says Uvda Dechol.
Where do you see Uvda Dechol?
The previous, just before where you started, but just before the Tana Rabbanan in Beis Yosef. It's
So
a little bit of a different case.
That's what you're worried about if you're going to scrape. But
that's something else.
That's later.
Right.
That's worrying about if you're scraping it off, sort of in the way that we talked about.
Yeah, but it establishes the principle of Uvda Dechol.
In other words, but who would ever think of such a thing? Doesn't that strike you as unusual that Uvda Dechol could apply to, like, I mean, what you can put on your shoes. It's not Uvda Dechol. You can put on your socks and then your shoes, and yada.
Well,
we don't say Uvda Dechol. Why do we apply Uvda Dechol by oil?
Well,
and
I mean, it depends on why you're.
I don't know.
I mean, if we connect it back to refuah, then it's Uvda Dechol, because refuah is supposed to be something you do on.
Right. I mean, that's what I want to say. I want to say that somehow,
it's like if you're worried about, like, oh, like my hands are chapped, right? Like, okay.
Seems like we're uncomfortable with this whole refuah thing, and the oil, even though we allow you to do it for refuah, right? We allow you to put oil on a makkah, right? Isn't that what we said in Sif Aleph, if I remember correctly? But you could,
Could just use the shemen.
You could use the shemen, and over there we didn't.
Well,
there it's just like on a certain area, but when you do your whole body, I don't know. When you do your whole body for hana'ah, all of a sudden, I don't know, but kol gufo, any part of your body, I guess, for hana'ah, you have to do a shinui. What about in your motnav? You have to do a shinui there. Maybe it's a general rule. First,
yeah, I mean, I don't take the motnav in Aleph as a way of saying like davka motnav. I think it's just general. Like,
in other words, first of all, we're saying that you can do it for refuah, and then we're saying, and even if it's not refuah, whether it is refuah or it isn't refuah, you should always do it with a shinui. You have to say it like that. And then why do you have to do it with a shinui? Because it's uvda dechol. And what uvda dechol? Refuah. But you're allowed to do refuah in this type of refuah. But it's still like we don't want you to do refuah. That's what I'm saying. It's a little weird.
Well, are we understanding b'chol goof as like any body part or on the whole body as one unit? Maybe
I
there's
think
some.
it means any. I said
Yeah.
you could learn it either way, but I think it means any. You can put oil anywhere, not just your motnav, but for hana'ah. In other words, you presumably wouldn't put oil on your arm for refuah, but for hana'ah you could do it. But then you should do the shinui. In all cases, you should do the shinui because uvda dechol. Well, what uvda dechol? The uvda dechol is refuah, even though this refuah we're letting you do. I'm just saying it's a little bit weird. Like we don't say you have to do everything with the shinui on Shabbat. What puts things into the category of uvda dechol?
Wait, Rav Nachum, where do you get that the Uvda Dechol is refuah? How do you know it's not like bathing?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm just listening to what you guys are saying. I might have said differently. I might have said that only scratching is uvda dechol. Lo yishav shef b'koach. I'm just going back to the tour to the Beit Yosef. V'lo mitgarin. This is Rashi. Lo mitgarin. What is mitgarin? I think it means scratching. Yeah.
Scrape it off. Right?
Well, that's the scraping.
Scraping.
Right? Yeah.
Don't scrape. The have uvda dechol. Scraping is uvda dechol.
I think though this is something that came up in the Mishnah brochure is like once because you have a migareret, right? You have a tool of some sort. You said probably like a seashell or something. The moment a tool comes involved into something that we already like are a little nervous about, it becomes. I think every uvda dechol involves a tool.
Okay, so then I'm back to my question. What's the problem with rubbing your body with oil? What uvda dechol is that?
Oh, because the normal.
Don't tell me it's uvda dechol.
The normal method of doing it involves this megareret, which would be an uvda dechol. So we want to keep you away from it a little bit. So what do? You do it with a shinoi.
It is interesting. The puzzlement, but I also just venture to say is that when you have, absolute malacha, are very, how can I say, a more clear drabanan. So we do things to escape the strictures of the, let's say the malacha, and if it escapes the stricture of the malacha, it escapes the stricture of the malacha. But since this is kind of a created category, so since it's a created category, we'll see if I can finish the sentence. Since it's a created category, we bolster its createdness, meaning we still has to exist.
You're saying precisely because it's
something good for the Jewish society when you have this. It's not like a malacha. Oh, it's not a malacha, so you haven't done a malacha. But this is kind of part of its created nature. So I think
saying dafka because it's a weak
malacha,
we have to strengthen it
by
saying do the shinui. But I also, I think that makes sense. I also think that I sort of like what Joel is saying about the scraping, because I did learn when I studied in classics. I remember that I Greek about ancient Greek and Roman society. They did cover their bodies with oil and then scrape, and that was so maybe the oil covering might lead you to scraping if you wouldn't remind yourself with a shinui. Oh, it's Shabbos. Then, and you would do it in the normal way. Then you would just pick up by rote, by common practice. You would just pick up. The next thing you do is pick up the clamshell and start scraping yourself, and that you can't do. So therefore, you do this oil with a shinui, so that you remember. Oh, I better not do this other thing. It's like if you take a cold shower on Shabbos, let's say you're allowed to take a cold shower on Shabbos, right? We discussed that last week. You take a cold shower, but you're in the shower, and then all of a sudden you pick up the bar of soap that's there, and you start using that, and that might be not allowed. So maybe you have to do it like take a cold shower with a shinui. Maybe take out the, whatever. Take out the soap from the shower before you go in, because you might just by mistake do something that you're not supposed to do. You might start, I don't know, cutting your fingernails in the shower. Whatever customs you may have that you do.
I did say that last time. I mean, there is that. very few people just take a regular shower these days. There's, a lot of things go to that ritual of a shower. Nonetheless, last week we worked very hard to trying to find some heterim for showers. So I don't want to go back on
Yeah.
that.
But I'm just saying, I'm not going back.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, yeah, take a shower, but you might start doing some things that you shouldn't do in there. So probably we should do some kind of I think that's the idea. You do some kind of shinui.
Okay. I'm with you.
Yeah, you do some kind of shinui here with the oil, so that you remember not to do other things. Okay, we actually sort of covered that base Yosef, where he just quotes the Gemara, really, where this is from. He said, I mean, I read it myself. I guess everybody could read it themselves. It says, right, you shouldn't mishafshef b'koach. But let's read back. Continue, Isaac, in the Gimel.
Okay. Okay. V'lo megarelin b'chli ha'isui ha'asui lechach shehu ke'uvda dechol. Aval im hayu yadav או רגליו מתנופות בטיט וצואה יכול לגרר כדרכו, שאז ניכר שאינו עושה לרפואה. Okay, so you don't scrape with a tool that's been created for that, because that's similar to an uvda dechol. But if your hands or your feet were covered in clay or excrement, you can scrape to your heart's content, because everybody understands that's not done for the purposes of refuah.
You see this sort of internal contradiction here. Is uvda dechol refuah, or is the problem refuah or uvda dechol? Let's look at the Shulchan Aruch. How's the Shulchan Aruch? Does the Shulchan Aruch fix this up in any way? Let's see. Maybe sometimes Shulchan Aruch makes it a little bit clearer.
We go to Gimel.
Yeah, go to Gimel and Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah. Ein megardin bechli ha'isui lechach. Af im ken.
Ela im ken.
Ela im ken hayu yadav o raglav mitunfot batit v'tzoah. Okay.
Oh, so he clears it up by not giving any reasons, right?
Yeah, nothing.
He doesn't say whether it's because of uvda dechol or refuah. He just says, don't do it. Don't scrape unless you're really dirty. Then you could.
But there's a Magen Avraham here that notes a Gemara that says if you have a special kli for it, it's permissible.
Right.
And then apparently some people make themselves special brushes out of pig hair.
Yeah, umizeh nagu aptulot. So young women, liot lehem kli miser chazir. I actually had one of these. My mother got me once. I don't know why she got it for me, but she got me a brush, like a hairbrush that was with boar hairs. It wasn't plastic. It was a thing, a boar hair brush. So these young women had a boar hair brush, miyuchad l'Shabbos. And then, I don't know if it was for their hair or for their bodies. I'm not sure. But then it was permitted because sounds like it's uvda dechol. It's not uvda dechol if you have a special one for Shabbos.
I mean, we haven't been talking about brushing hair, and I think it seems like brushing.
It's probably scraping the body with the brush.
Yeah.
But it's a brush. Okay. All right, back to the Shulchan. So he does sort of fix it up by getting rid of the reasons. Okay, go on, Dalit.
Dalit. Okay. Lo yisoch raglo b'shamen v'hu betoch hamena'al o sandal mipnei she'ha'ol mitrachech v'dameh le'ibud. Okay, so you don't put oil on your feet while you're wearing shoes or sandals, because then the leather will get soft, and that's like ibud.
Right, you'll notice you're processing your sandals. The oil will
you're
get onto the sandals and improve them.
Right. Aval sach raglo umanicho mena'al v'sandal v'sach kol gufo umitagel al gabe or. But you can put oil on your foot and then put it in your sandal or your shoes. And you can also put oil all over your body so long as you avoid the leather that's on your shoe.
No. Umitagel. Like you wrap yourself with al gabe or. I think that's what it means, right? You can put on leather clothing. That's the way I understood it.
Okay. I was
In other words,
thinking
you could put
I was
any.
thinking like you make a circle around the leather in the sense of like you avoid putting the oil there. Okay.
No, I think it means just to mitagel. I think is like to adorn yourself. I think.
Okay.
I think. If
Well,
anyone has a better shot, I'm happy to hear it.
I thought it was
Okay.
like kind of you turn in the leather like you put it on, something similar to that, but like
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So you don't have to worry about incidental oiling of leather. You can't like pour it onto your foot and then it's going to pour also onto your shoe. You pour it onto your foot ahead of time and then put your foot. When you're wearing the sandal, you can't put oil on your feet. That's the point.
Yeah, even though presumably it'll have the same impact if you oil up your entire foot as if you and then put your
Right.
right. But the two are disconnected, so it doesn't appear to be.
Yeah, it's like
It's not a
less of
single
it's
action.
less for sure going to happen. It's more separate. Exactly. It's more like a grumma.
והוא שלא יהא בשמן הנישוף מגופו לאור, שיעור כדי לעובדו, אז הוא מותר, אפילו יש בו כדי לצחצחו, כיוון שאינו מכוון לצחצחו.
מכוון.
Sorry, מכוון, pardon me. אבל אם יש בו כדי לעובדו, אף על פי שאינו מכוון לעובדו ולא לצחצחו, אסור. Okay. So this is a case in which there's like the oil isn't going to slip from your body onto the leather.
No, the amount. It's the amount of oil.
Well, I was about to let me finish.
Yeah, okay.
Like you're not going to have enough of it slip onto the leather so that you'll be doing some sort of ufda, like working of the leather by putting the oil on it.
This is exactly your point. This is exactly your point. In other words, he's saying, when I said you could put it on your foot and then put your foot in, that's only if the amount of oil on your foot was very small. But if you really oiled up your foot and now it's going to really improve the shoes, then no.
Well, but then if that was the case, then you would say perhaps that you can put oil on that small amount of oil on your foot or some particular type of oil that doesn't rub off in the same way on your foot while you're wearing sandals, right? Like it's both things. It's not just the amount, it's also the like conceptual thinking of the two things.
I wonder if we could maybe say like there's a risk of as you're like pouring the oil, you'll pour extra. So maybe we want to be careful around that. And so if it's before, that's fine, but before you put your foot in, maybe if you pour the right amount, you're fine. But if you're wearing the shoe, you might pour extra and yeah.
I like that. That makes sense to me. In other words, once you're pouring it on your foot, even if you try to pour a little bit, it's for sure going to drip off. At least locally, there'll be extra. There'll be too much. I can see it. I can see that pouring onto the foot is going to be more likely to be a problem than pouring on your foot before it's in the sand. Anyway, he says, but when we pour it before it, it has to be that the amount that comes off of your foot onto the leather of the shoe is not enough to significantly process it.
Yeah. Okay. So it's in that case, it's mutar, even if there's enough oil to get it like the leather a little damp, so long as you didn't mean to get it damp.
Or shiny, maybe.
Shiny?
Yeah. I think it means to polish your shoes is how you say it, I think. In other words, you can polish shoes by putting a little oil on them. That's okay.
But if there's enough that you're making some sort of improvement or you're working the leather somehow, even if you didn't mean to do anything to it and you didn't mean to shine them, that's aser. Because like you're doing it regardless, right?
Secretia. Kind of like secretia. You can't tell me you're not trying to do it. You're doing it. Okay, guys, fellows, people, we have finished this little siman. It's basically all things to do with oil, right? It's refuah with oil. It's uvda dechol with oil. It's ibud of the shoes with oil. It's all kinds of things that are potentially problems with oil. And heterim. I think it was very good. I hope this encourages everybody to keep their skin better. How do you say? Oiled? There's another word for it. Better.
Conditioned?
Moisturized.
Conditioned.
Moisturized.
Yeah, moisturized. Keep your skin moisturized. Probably a good idea.
Where did
Okay.
the Jews get the clamshells?
Well, they didn't. The guy threw them out, and the Jews said, "What? These are perfectly good clamshells."
Right.
You get it from your Chiloni neighbor.
Okay.
From the banded murex that they use to actually not a clam to make the tzitzi.
Make the challah.
That's a snail. It's more of a
That'd be
spiral.
like the smallest shell ever. I don't think that's useful.
Or you
Please.
just
I'm raining on your
get,
parade.
like the shells that you're caught up in your fishing net.
That could be also. Anyway, yeah, it's an interesting question. No, but I think people used oil. They didn't have shampoo in the old days. They had oil. Okay. And next
So
week,
wait, Rabbi, what do
Yes.
you want to say briefly about taking medicines?
well, first of all, I want to say that we're gonna study it for a couple weeks.
Okay,
next-
so fine.
That's
what I
the
meant.
first thing I want to say. But in general, yeah, I mean, it seems to be. I mean, I don't know. You can't take medicine on Shabbat. I mean, you can take it if it's a food, if it's people take it when they're healthy, or obviously we have another heter, which is that you need to take like 8 days, or your whole life, but you need to take, let's say, an 8-day supply of penicillin. Then and obviously one day is going to be at least one day is going to be on Shabbat, so you're allowed to continue you're allowed to continue the procedure. And even if you could even theoretically start on Shabbat if that's when you got the medicine. It's a very weird thing. It's a very weird thing with medicine. It's like this. If you're a little bit sick, then you can't do it. But if you're really sick, then you can do it. Like they say about headaches. If you have a really bad headache, then you can take it. If there's a little headache, then you can't take it. Okay. Anyway, those are just some practical halachic ideas. Next week we'll continue. We'll do the next siman. I'll send out some sources in the coming days. The following week will be Shavuot, so we'll be off. Okay. All the best.
Thank you, Rabbi Nachum.
Thank you.